also add the, sorry, turned on the captions as well. Hi, everyone. This is Vicente Cruz, Oakland Greens Event and Fundraising Coordinator, and hello to YouTube for the 20 people that'll see this once it's uploaded, and hello to Instagram Live. We are here at our second of 2024. I guess it would be our virtual discussion groups. We are still doing in-person. We have in-person things when they are warranted, but if for one of the beauty of having the hybrid events is if we need to go virtual, we just can. And so here we are for this discussion, virtual again. And the topic today is about housing. And as I showed in the video, will there be another bubble or not? And I think I was going to go ahead and start that. I didn't actually put them in order, but the notes I took, I have different things. And I wanted to start where they were saying, get ready with your finances and savings and get your credit score up. And all I hear when I hear that stuff too is, oh, of how prejudice that can be, right? Okay, well, credit score. Okay, so and I'm sure I'm an exception, not where near the norm. I've never owned a credit card ever in my entire life. I'm 60 years old, never had a credit card. I've never been in any giant debt of any form. Anything I've ever bought, cars, stereos, rent, whatever, I just pay cash. I have the money and then you just pay for it. And I'm actually an advocate for like, why do we need credit companies? And that's the other thing, out of all the things they said in that video, I'm going to debt. That's another thing that I hear is go into debt. That's how you be the American dream. That should be the new motto. Not pursuit of happiness, but pursuit of debt, right? How do you stay in debt? Which I don't like. We talked about that on other topics, whether it be education, right? People coming out of, there's a game called Cash Flow. And which is funny because the man, it's the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and they're under investigation now for fraud. Which I think is hilarious. So all these people who think they're wealthy, they're really not all that rich or wealthy. Sidebar again, I also remember when my mother used to deliver papers and she'd be in these wealthy areas of Moraga, Orinda, Ream, multi-million-dollar houses, even in the 90s, right? No furniture, nothing inside, right? Because they've spent everything, they're sleeping on cots inside and paper plates because they spend all their money on their house. Anyway, but again, wanting people to go into debt. And sorry, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. In the game Cash Flow, usually the person that wins is the garbage collector, the plumber, right? Like really just the trade jobs, because they have no real big education debt. They move up and their salary goes up, but again, their overhead, they don't have anything really to pay back. But the doctors and the lawyers think it's really hard to win that because you have this mountain of debt that you have to pay off all the time, right? That's the same thing with housing, right? Or your equity. Something that was all said to me, one about housing, and this is from someone who I very much respect. They teach first home buyer workshops over in San Francisco for Homeownership SF, working with the LGBTQ plus community, and shout out Shannon Way. They still do that. Had said to me a few things. One, you should never buy a house as a financial investment. Right? That's not why what you should be looking. You should be looking for housing that you want to live in for the rest of your life. Every time, even if you move, you bought another house, but that you should be looking at housing as this is the neighborhood, this is the community that I want to be in for a very, very long time. And another thing that they said to me was that one of the reasons housing, rents, and all these things are so high is because we, the consumer, sort of like the electorate, that we're willing to pay it. So I want to buy a house and Orlando wants to buy a house, but Orlando does work for, a trade job, whereas I'm in a startup, a tech startup, all this money. And I just go, well, he's going to give you 300,000. I'll give you 400 only because I can afford it. And it's almost like predatory, like, oh, just because I can, which goes back to everything, always trying to tie it back into alternative politics. Oakland Greens say too, where it's like, because we're not educating to make good community members, right? Teaching to the test and all these different things. So when they come out, well, one, especially if you're in the hood, none of those kids going into college are pretty much probably still don't know how to do their taxes or would even understand a rental application or a home ownership form, would have no idea because it's not taught to them, right? And having these discussions and listening to them, not even talking at them or talking to them, but listening to them and what they think. I've said this tons of times when I was a teacher. The most difficult question you could ever ask my elementary or middle school students, I never taught high school, was, what do you think? What do you think? They're so busy trying to give you the right answer that there's no critical thinking whatsoever. So that ties into housing. They have no idea how to navigate this stuff as well. So another thing they mentioned, like purchasing power. Well, that has a huge class, what we call class and ethnicity component, right? Black folks don't have a lot of purchasing power, even though we spend billions of dollars, right? So somehow we don't seem to have that, right? Poor folks in Appalachia don't have purchasing power, right? In fact, most of, oh, I don't see most, sorry, getting carried away with just not professional and more casual discussion. I know people who have houses, apartment complexes, and all these things, but they were given to them, right? And now we're into generational wealth. It was given to them, right? In the neighborhood where I'm at, even though they have that, they don't keep up on the property. They don't do anything to save, like start saving money to pay the taxes at the end, property taxes at the end, right? Oh, that should be another one. We should talk about property taxes. And things. So then they end up losing their own, the generational, assets of the corrupt capitalist system that even they get, right? So I think that they don't, of course, didn't mention that in that low piece. Wasn't using video that had in-depth things into it as well. They talked about, oh, and maybe it's good. Does anyone from what I said so far have any comments before I just, so I can keep on running? Yes, Dale, please unmute and yes.
Well, just a few comments about what you said about you were able to be taught how to think at a very young age. It took me as a junior in college to learn how to think rather than memorize. So congratulations. Number two, when you started to talk about people going in debt, buying a mortgage, and all of this, you didn't say what maybe, I guess is my question, what would happen if in California we made a law saying to buy property you had to pay cash and prove that you didn't go and borrow it from somebody and are committed on a loan note somewhere else or whatever? Would prices then drop dramatically?
That is very interesting. I wonder. And go ahead, Greg, please. Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty complicated problem because I think that a lot of the reason for the was it increasing house prices is speculation, and so I don't, it's not so much. Sure. I would say, yeah, the majority of people that buy houses are going to be not paying cash. They're going to be getting a mortgage or borrowing it from somebody, whether it's their parents or whatever. But the question of how much the prices would drop depends on the speculators a lot. So I don't know, but that, it's it's not a scenario that I can envision anytime soon. Any any legislature anywhere in the world saying that you can only pay cash.
Well, what if we,
But
if,
before we get into that, which is an interesting idea, it's an interesting thing. But I do want to go back to the question of what you said about people being educated about how mortgages work and making payments when they buy a house. Because I think the 2008 crash is a really, really good example of what happens when a lot of people are tempted, and they're saying, oh, look, no down payment, get this great house, and don't even worry about filling out the forms, because at the height of the sales there, the brokers were making so much money by getting anybody, any warm body to go and buy a house. They didn't really care if you could qualify or not, and so all kinds of people were getting houses that they really, it was because of these balloon payments, really low monthly payments, but then there's a balloon payment, 24, 36, or 48 months out, and nobody's, the realtor is not talking about the balloon payment. Just sign the contract. You get a house, you only have to pay $75 a month or whatever. So all kinds of people, and then of course the crash happened, and balloon payments happened, and everything, and so tons and tons of people got foreclosed on. So I think it's a great reflection of how people weren't able to resist that because of the context that these realtors were coming in, and people, nobody's going to read the contract, but they didn't even have the savvy to ask the right questions about, is this $75 a month payment going to be for the entire 20 years that you're telling me this is for? Or, I mean, oh, no, there's a balloon payment. So, okay, anyway. So I think your point about education and critical thinking is really, really key to this, to this whole question.
okay, and reverse mortgages? Orlando, please.
Yeah, I was gonna add on to it too. The education is really important from a local level, because now you can understand the environmental process of when you're getting your house, the building code, and the building inspectors, those things that can turn your housing area to blight areas. That's, I think, will be a key of education. So we can get good quality of homes. Because if the city inspector comes and, hey, this area don't look good, you got $1 million house, but you got 50 million people living in there. It's blight. Let's get them up out of there. It's habitat. Your grass ain't cut. It's environmental hazard. Now they can't afford it because they own 2 acres of land, but those other areas might be on Caltrans area or county areas, and they can't cut the trees or the bushes. So now they have to be subject to that same scrutiny. But I agree, education is the key.
Absolutely, and I'm writing tons of stuff down, and I guess I'll just go in immediate order. So when you mentioned that, Orlando, I put down squatters. So I know in Philadelphia, I remember during the Chicano movement, the Young Lords and all that, they would go into public houses that were just sitting there, like you said, blighted.
Yeah.
Like the same area, because again, shout out for movie night later in the year where he's showing Let It Burn again. When you go down to Osage Avenue in Philadelphia, the move was a lot of that areas are still just look like they were when they were bombed out. Now then they would go into that house, paint it, rewire it, hook up the plumbing, right? I mean, they wouldn't have an inspector, but all up to code, all safe. And then they would move people in, and then they do like the Black Panthers, where you'd have a lunch and breakfast program for kids. There'd be, oh, you need a suit and, practice interview, right? They would turn it into, community space and low income housing, and then having services, have drug and alcohol counseling in there, education on how to, fucking balance a checkbook, how to open up a bank account, any of those things to help navigate this corrupt system. And even though we're all mostly, definitely, I think the Oakland Greens as a group, and then the county as a group, and the thousands of registered Green members in our county are anti-capitalist, we're also practical and know that it would never change overnight. It would be such a billionth of a percentage chance that we would be organized enough to take over like an entire city, which I mean run not just a slate of three, like you'd run on, all of a sudden the whole city council and the whole school board would all of a sudden become people before profit candidates, right? Taking your tax dollars and using them, taking the public's tax dollars and using it back for the public before they would use it for, and just to attempt it, going, okay, you think crime would be down if we decided not to take a lot of that money, because half of the budget goes to police. And if we're going to cut that in half and we're going to put it first towards, public works projects. So there's jobs, right? Education as well, because at least in the Oakland Greens education platform, it is a huge public works project because we are going to rebuild and re-envision what a school even looks like, from the playground to the classroom, right? Someone has to build those. Someone has to landscape that. Those are working deal for that, then go and can also get houses and probably have a larger cash payment. Oh, and that ties into something else that Dale said too about the cash. So I agree with Greg again, that's like too large of a step and maybe even an overreach. Right? Like, well, maybe I don't want to pay all that cash or whatever. But what if, I think you could compromise and have local, especially here in Oakland, that at least half of or whatever, there'd be some sort of legislation to say that you have to, or you get discounts. You don't have to, because once you get half, it gets into violating people's sovereignty, autonomy. But you get a lot of breaks if you borrow from local banks or credit unions, right? Or even breaks if you have over half of the payment in cash. So you're going to take out a lower loan. And all of this ties back to as well, which I think doesn't get said enough. Anytime I talk about raising wages so people have more equity for purchasing power for housing or whatever, instead of wondering where it's going to come from, we got to get away or get into the conversation of, do we need billionaires, right? Or everyone at the top needs to take a pay cut. And you could do that easily with no more bonuses. No more bonuses. I'm sorry, you're already getting $500,000 a year. You can't live on that? Get the fuck out of here. What? Shut your mouth. You can't tell me you can't, because I know tons of people, me included, who are living on a lot less. So, but at least having those discussions, I'm not saying that is oh, that'll fix everything, but having discussions about greed, how much is too much, what can you do when there's so many people in poverty? I mean, Taylor Swift gives $100,000 to the shooting victim at the Kansas City Chiefs parade while she's still a billionaire. What? You could solve education problem for the whole country. You could get health care with probably a quarter of your what you make in a year. Take a quarter of that and say, hey, here you go. I'm funding health care for everyone. I've just privatized it, just mine. But anyway, please go ahead, Dale.
Yes. What about having an educational discussion about getting rid of landlords completely?
Exactly.
Well, I definitely don't like the name landlord. Nobody is, I call the owner of this building, they are the property manager, right? They're the property manager. They're not my landlord, or not the landlord. I only like for many things, because it just kind of claims ownership, and I don't want to claim ownership over a person.
You eliminate renting. You eliminate the rental.
Mm,
payments.
mm. Hmm.
I know Greg's gonna respond
Yeah,
to
because
this.
that's right along the line of, there's a book that one of my book groups is just finishing up. It's called Jackson Rising Redux. It's about Jackson, Mississippi, where they have created this cooperation Jackson, doing a whole bunch of very progressive things. I'm going to put the name of there's the book in the chat. And one of their main essays is about housing, and in many of the chapters in the book, it talks at least a little bit about housing. And one of the main themes is that a major reason, maybe even the biggest reason for the housing crisis, is that housing is not treated as a human need. It's treated as a profit-making venture. It's a commodity. And so when you have a commodity that's up for speculation, up for profit making, there's always going to be losers, And so one of the main themes in the book is you have to decommodify housing. Housing has to become a human right. And one way to do that in the short term, before we get a fully eco-socialist society and take over all the government, everything, what they're doing in Jackson, Mississippi, and as well as some other places, you're starting land trusts to take properties off of the market and keep it at a reasonable level that people can pay. And so they got 30 properties now, 30 properties in Jackson, at least when the book was published. 30 properties that they've taken off the market into the land trust. And some of them have now been rehabilitated, and people are living in them and paying reasonable rent because they're not it's not for speculation. So in the short term, we can start land trusts all over the country and start taking properties off the market. But ultimately, yeah, you got to have like what they're doing in what's it, Vienna. I think Vienna, Austria. The majority of people live in public housing because the housing is nice, because it's a kind of a socialist government, and they say, look, we think housing is a human right. We're going to have all this nice public housing for people. It's going to be affordable. It's not going to be up for speculators. And so the majority of people in Vienna, Austria, like to live in public housing because it's nice and affordable. So yeah, that's where we got to go in the long run. And, housing should be a human right. It should not be a commodity.
And I would agree with that. And I think most Greens would agree with that as well. I'll look that up and see if I can get that book, and maybe we'll listen to it. Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Or sorry, Dale, please.
Don't we have a land trust in Oakland called the East Bay Permanent Real Estate? What's the acronym for it? I can't remember.
Yeah, something, but I don't know if they're doing much. The housing around here is so expensive. It's a lot. You can buy a lot of stuff in Jackson, Mississippi, whereas you're gonna probably have to pay 10 times as much here.
Well, does that get into it as well, where, okay, well, housing as a human right, the compromise with the capitalists is then, okay, well, then you can't, I mean, and actually Oakland tries, it's written, but no one follows it, that, oh, well, you can't have a house that's more than what the lowest person, is making, right? You have to figure out what the real income is, like, okay, well, if I worked at Taco Bell full time, this is what I can afford. That's how much my housing, should be like a 16th of that or whatever, right? Or maybe that's the legislation that you can't charge for any property you buy. I don't know if that would help bring prices down, but you can't charge more than, you only get to charge a 16th of what the person is making, because right now people pay half. I'm actually over the money I make, whether it be a family or just hours and all that, my rent is way over half, and that's just too much, right? You shouldn't have to be over there. I even think 25%, a quarter might be a little too high, because you're still adding food, and if people have kids, and I think it still ties back to as well, then, okay, in any sort of multinational or even national company, maybe even state, anything that has, actually you'd have to probably do with how many employees you have, then the top management, owners, CEOs, whatever, can't make X amount more than the lowest paid employee, right? You start regulating it that way, and then either you'll see their wages come up, right? Because they don't want to lose their money. It's like, oh, I need to get my lowest paid employee to be closer to me. And again, and whether or not we need doing that. But I do believe housing is a human right. Healthcare, I think, is a right just by being born. And maybe that's another something for 2025, right? Like, are they rights also because nobody picks to be born, right? As far as we know, nobody chooses, like, oh, I'm gonna be with that family, or I'm gonna, that too, it just kind of happens. But yeah, I think that housing is definitely, oh, here we have two. The speculators, I'm going back to the comments from you all too. So the speculators too, where are they coming up with that algorithm too, right? So they're speculating on housing prices where, again, someone that I respect says the only reason prices go so high is because we're willing to pay them. If we weren't willing to pay them, right? Because actually right now, as they said in the video in 02, it's starting to actually just level out because people don't have the money. And actually, in some instances, rents and everything are starting to come down a little bit because people don't have the money, right? Every year, they raise our rents a little bit more, but our wages aren't going. So it's like, okay, well, eventually you price everybody out. And if there's no one to pay it, and they're so high too, like, so if I was to leave and then they decided, oh, well, you know what, they're going to try and rent this particular one-bedroom unit out for $5,000 a month, right? Which is not uncommon, right? Downtown, all that, some of the, between 3 and 5, pretty common. Definitely also San Francisco. I know it's crazy. But where I live, people would look like for really next to the junkies, the pimps, fucking hookers, right? Providers, fucking houseless, everything. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. No one's going to do it. No one would do it. So they'll be forced to go, oh, well, you know what, really, this is probably more of a, $1,600 unit, not even the 2 that I pay. Because of that. And it's gotten worse since the pandemic. Anyway, that's right too. Speculators. And then I want to do one more before I just open it back up. Comments too. So you did that one. Anyone know reverse mortgages? Heard of reverse mortgages? Right? I'm not a big fan. No, where they pay you, it's really, Dale, do you know? Can you give us a overview?
Oh, yes. Yes, it's been terribly predatory by the banks because they've got logarithms regarding the death rates, and they're hoping that the amounts that you're getting back at the point where you die, the house is just the banks. It's just gone. There's no generational wealth that can be piled up from it at all. So they try now to sell those things with different kinds of conditions in them that argue that someone else can receive those payments somehow but you want to stay away from something like a reverse mortgage because they've been historically predatory as can be, especially on elderly people that have trouble making this kind of a financial decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're not good. What else we did? That. I have to. Oh, okay, let's do this one. So I'd like to talk about, again, this is going way down the rabbit hole of ownership as a concept. We kind of touched on it when I was saying I don't like the word landlord personally. That whole connotation of where landlord comes from, right? Way back. I also think we identify a lot as kings and queens. Like black people will be like, "Oh, I'm a black king," or "my black queens," or whatever. And I always, and I say it with humor, but I often say to them like, "Oh, really? So, like the 11th century called, and they'd like their system of government back? Like, what we're gonna go? That's what we're going to think to aspire to." That somebody's bloodline makes them wise of some sort. I was like, well, especially when you get into Europe, all that inbreeding, I don't think there was a lot, it's almost like the Game of Thrones, Targaryens. Every time a Targaryen's born, you got to flip a coin to see if it comes out crazy or if it comes out regular, like an intelligent person. I don't think, what is it, a lot of anarchist sayings too, all property is theft. So I think, or I'd like to hear what people think of trying to change our mindset that we don't really own anything. And we don't, right? Like once we pass, like, I mean, nobody can confirm what happens after you die, but you definitely aren't taking your house with you. So like, I mean, so would everyone kind of subscribe like to that notion that like the concept of ownership doesn't really exist?
The U.S. government, is founded on private property, and the law, I would say the bulk of the law has to do with private ownership, including, of course, how corporations are run. Corporations are run by they're owned by the stockholders, and so there's a whole section for the corporate law part. But nevertheless, in fact, originally the Declaration of Independence was going to talk about life, liberty, and the wait, no, where was the ownership, the property? Jefferson changed. Which one was it? Do you know, Dale? Anyway, there was going to be something about owning property in the Declaration of Independence. The last moment.
Right. I know what you're referring to, but I can't think of it either.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So just at the very last minute, the Declaration of Independence ended up not having the line about the country should be founded for the property owners. But nevertheless, when you get down to how the legal system was already at that time based on private property, and so well, voting originally when this country was founded, you could not vote unless you were a white male property owner, and you certainly couldn't hold office unless you were a wealthy property owner. So all along, this country has been based on what was it? Something like the holy or something, the holy right, the sacred right of property. And so those that own, those that control, made sure that they just kept it going. And they for the most part, they made sure that their heirs had property and their heirs would maintain their privileges based on property, and it just kept going. And to this very day, that's why the ruling class bases it all on private property. So yeah, I mean, this is like when everybody talks about revolution, whether you're a Marxist or not, a lot of it has to do with overturning the right of property versus the right of people, the right of the government is supposed to be based on the people as opposed to those who own everything.
The
There you go.
less over the landlord. That was Malcolm X's speech, right? Right, in Ballad of the Bullet. He talks about revolutions are bloody, revolutions will overturn, right? What is the Russian Revolution based on? The landless against the landlord, you know, the American Revolution, anyway. But what it does say, you know, the original one is life, liberty, and property
Yeah.
was the original, and then Jefferson changed it to pursuit of happiness. I just
Yeah.
Googled it while you were talking.
Right.
That's it. That's right. Believe it or not, again, the 20 people that'll watch this in Instagram Live, internet's not just for porn. You actually can find out information. You have an encyclopedia at your fingertips all the time.
Yeah, look it up before they start charging you for it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, we did talk about the bubble, and those are predatory lending, generational wealth. Oh, again, we're still at the ownership as a concept and all that. And if I remember, I think a lot of First Nations did not have a concept of ownership whatsoever. They figured they were part of the land as opposed to overseers of it, right? Many tribal spirituality had earth and trees and things. Those were their deities, right? The animal kingdom, right? All those things, the buffalo, right? Why do you think when you would hunt and kill, you would actually thank that animal for giving its life to sustain your tribe, right? Like it was a big deal. Why a lot of cultures look at preparing meals as it should do it with love, because, you know, should be thankful stuff given it to us. So yeah, I think I subscribe that. But again, I know I'm coming from a place, you know, as I often say, anarchist, atheist, and consensual ethical non-monogamy activist, right? I really feel that those principles need to be out in the forefront, that they should not be the fringe, as it were. And part of, I think, my anarchist value is, again, I was saying before, I don't like using the word my. Nope, not my partner, not my girlfriend, not my friend. They are friends to me. And actually, I end up having family. I get so close to people that I just end up adopting everyone. And if I don't, then I'm just not in my circle. But I think that by having those and trying to get back to that, I think that's something we lost way back in the Industrial Revolution and even before that. Like if we would have been able, I think we still could have had all of this technology that we have. It might have been slower to get there. But if we would have had more of a balance within nature, right? If when everybody started exploring, if they realized and had more of an attitude like, oh, I'm not discovering something, right? Obviously, there's people already there. They've been around way before we were there. And having that balance, I think we would, but anyway, we didn't do that, right? And I say we as just like Homo sapiens, like people. That it's harder to do now. And we get caught up into, God, and all my metaphors are like movie cliches, right? So it's Jurassic Park. When Ian Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum's character, says, we're so busy worried about whether we can do something, we never stop to really think, should we do something? So should I do that, right? And I can attest to that because, again, in my more wild years, there was a whole bunch of things I look back, I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. I was lucky I got away with it, but I probably shouldn't have done it. Like I definitely wouldn't do it now. So having more of those values, and I think that also goes back, now we're back to education and creating good community members too. How do we have these discussions, opening our minds to other things, because the norms of what we have been taught are just so hurtful, not just to us. We're literally like changing the planet so fast. And I'm also on that too, is like, oh, we're not killing the planet, we're just killing ourselves. The planet will be fine. The planet will adjust to a world without us, without Homo sapiens on it. Like the cockroaches and the snakes and the alligators fucking have it back, right? That too, on home ownership, generational wealth. But when we go to back to housing as a right, do you still see like a lot of places too where the entire block will be the same family? Will be the same family. So you have the parents in one house, and then eventually next door to them, their kids, you know, get married or whatever, or do whatever it is. Okay, I'm fucking get married. Anyway, like they end up partnering up. They live next door with their families. And then so now you have two families right next to each other, and then another one, then those, and just on and on and on and on and on. So the community becomes, it's actually families in different areas, right? I mean, I know that's again how it used to be back in the day too, right? You would, you know, build your own home, and then, you know, of course they were more agricultural back then, but then, you know, you have another house onto it where your kids would do, help you farm and expand and feed your family that way, you know. So, well, I don't, I also am oh, sorry, go ahead, Dale, please.
Oh, in North Korea, everybody is guaranteed a house, but somebody just like among the Indian tribes you mentioned, there was no such thing as a realtor in Indian society. They didn't have any concept of owning a bit of creation. But both in North Korea and both among the Indian tribes, somebody had to decide where they could build their teepee in the community. And somebody's deciding things in North Korea too about where you're going to be in one of those free houses. And in North Korea, if they knock on your door and they don't find a picture of Jim or what's his name, Kim Jong-un, you're executed.
Imagine that. That sounds like something Trump would do. He's
Well,
that
the issue is
he's that kind of
how do
ego.
we
He's got that
decide these
ego.
things?
Huh?
How would we be deciding all these questions I raised?
Well, oh, go ahead, Greg. Yes, please.
Yeah, that's another thing that Jackson Rising Redux book that I mentioned covers about decision making, and they talk a lot about what's happening in northeast Syria, Rojava. It's the Kurdish area there. They have about 3 million people now that are living in these. They call them communes, but it's not like the old Soviet commune. What it is basically like a neighborhood, you know, a small neighborhood of like 100 and something, 150 people, and the commune, you know, gets together and makes decisions for whatever the neighborhood needs, and if the neighborhood needs to get together with other neighboring neighborhoods, you know, like there's a bigger decision that needs to be made, then they send representatives, and the representatives are immediately recallable. You know, they have to represent their neighborhood, and they get together and make the decisions. So I think the same kind of thing that's already happening in this Rojava, northeast Syria. I think it's also the way the Zapatistas do it in Mexico. You know, they do it from the bottom up, and they figure out what needs to get done, not just in housing or not just in food, but especially there in Rojava, they have self-defense because they're constantly under attack, mainly by the Turks. It used to be a little bit, but the Syrians used to give them trouble, but not so much anymore. Now it's mostly the Turks. But yeah, you know, they have to have constant joint decisions on defense, and they call it democratic confederalism because, you know, the neighborhoods get together with the larger areas, the regions, and then they have to get together with larger and eventually confederate the whole area, because you got to have, especially for the defense of the whole area, because you know the Turks hate the Kurds. And they're constantly attacking them.
Like my favorite musician, Tom Lear. Right? Anyone know who Tom Lear is?
Oh yeah, that famous
Oh, the black folks
songwriter.
hate the white folks, and the white folks
Yeah.
hate the black folks. All of my folks hate all of your folks. It's as American as apple pie. um,
National Brotherhood Week.
National Brotherhood Week, absolutely. Well, and also give a shout out too, even though I think they're really far away from it, but that's kind of what Community Democracy Project is talking about, right? More control of taxes by neighborhoods and my thing with them also, because I am on the idea that, oh, if we really want Community Democracy Project, find slates of candidates and run them. But what they also don't have in their discussions or in their platform is that in order for people to have that much time to invest in their community, you're going to have a shorter work week for the same hours. You need to give them time, because right now, the machine, the game is keep them exhausted. Keep them so exhausted that they just want to come home and sit on their couch and watch some bullshit reality TV. Make me forget, right? Please make me forget. I'm so angry. Everyone is so angry, and rightly so. But I do always put the ownership, we talk about, back on us, the electorate. We elect these fools. We keep doing it. We go out to rallies, we disrupt traffic, all that stuff, and not just going and finding the candidates, because it doesn't seem, oh God, I don't know if it was the Ralph Nader, it was on KPFA, of course, and they were talking about, as even within the duopoly. So when AOC and the like kind of Katie Porter and this next generation of Democrats got elected, Pelosi and the old guard fucking wanted to shut them out completely. Their ego, they felt like someone was taking over. I give us the same criticism within the Greens, right? We're all dying off. We're going to die off. We don't do enough. I said it in the meeting yesterday. It's not uploaded yet, again, YouTubers, but it will be soon. That I need to somehow muster the energy this year to try and find someone else to take this over. Even if it's not the Oakland Greens, some sort of group, like if you want to change it, you got to get fucking elected and change the fucking rules. Etch-a-sketch this motherfucker. All new systems. I ain't talking about tweaking. We ain't never been talking about tweaking. I'm getting hot. We never talked about tweaking the system. We want to change. We want new systems, because the system isn't broken. The system is corrupt. And it's designed to be that way. This is exactly how it's working perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. Can't even have fucking even the sporting, because why do I love sports so much? Because you can get all of a sudden fucking 20, 50, 100,000 people all thinking the same thing, right? If we can harness that, Dave Chappelle does a great bit about that. If people of African diaspora were as organized as the LGBTQ community, right? We'd be way further along than we are now. Or probably along the lines of police brutality and shit like that. If we had that type of organizing skills, but we don't. But if you can harness that. But mine too is like we can't even go after sports to a fucking celebration without, which it hasn't, I have not seen the actual, but the rumor control says that it's not even like, wasn't like some mass shooter. It was two motherfuckers beefing. Probably over, I can't see fucking Taylor, probably not Taylor, but some before, fucking over some bull. You stepped on my shoe, right? What does the Boondocks call that? Like a nigger moment, right? Motherfuckers, just the opportunity to fight and kill one another over some bullshit, right? That's why I never fucking spent well, now it's gone higher, of course, over $50 for any of my fucking tennies. I don't give a fuck you step on my shoe. Bought this shit at Big Five. Corporate shout out, not on purpose. But I don't think, again, I don't think that they have those discussions enough, but I'm all for it. I think way more local controls constantly. And I am big for representatives, going. And actually in the hood, sometimes you have to do that. Like, when they talk about restorative justice and all that shit, I know we're digressing now on different tracks to get to the same end. But we're having that issue here, right? After the pandemic, we have all these people who were staying in hotels that had no drug and alcohol or mental health services whatsoever. Now they're just living in their cars on the street, harassing people when they're off their meds and they're not high, or too high, and disrupting people who are already fucking stressed the fuck out. Cops don't do anything. Cops don't come, don't do shit. So who does it? The neighbors have to do it. The neighbors. And that takes on a lot of different forms. And it always seems to start out as discussions. But again, we're talking about especially around mental health, right? So they're crazy, right? They don't have the healthcare that they need to keep them and to keep them on, the schedule medication and all that shit too. So what ends up happening after is like, oh, it's just too much and we need to push the problem on because kids are getting hurt and single mothers and stuff are getting hurt. All of a sudden, the van catches on fire, right? And now you have to move. You have no choice because your house is gone. You were living in that car, right? Or also your drug supply dries up, right? They're not selling you your weed anymore. They're not going to do it because you can't keep your shit together, right? So it is a huge, huge problem. I put the onus back on us, the electorate, because we keep doing it. More so, I had I think in the end, I think it probably was a troll, but got into it. So, they shut down 101 again today. And they have been at bridges before, blocking off the Bay Bridge and things like that. And, and I go out there, I don't block traffic. When I was in the street activist, direct action stop war, very, very quickly, for a few reasons, we decided that we are not going to disrupt traffic for long periods of time, right? It was very strategic. We're going to this intersection and we're going to be here for this amount of time. Usually it depended on, shout out Brass Liberation Orchestra, for one song, right? Go on the street, block it. But anyway, we decided very quickly we weren't going to do that. But what we would shut down for a weekend is the federal building. Right? We'll shut down banks for an entire day. Right? We'll do things like that. And in the debate, because I said it too, it was like, oh, so if I'm trying to get my kid to the emergency room and now I'm stuck in traffic, right? And don't even have to be that extreme of it too. I just want to go home. Right? I'm navigating this corrupt capitalist system just like you. I just worked fucking 12 hours for fucking shit wages that I'm still going to be broke on. And now I can't even get home. So now I got to sit here for another fucking hour. Like that, again, corporate candidates don't give a fuck that you're shutting down the bridge. They don't care. If it would have, they wouldn't be given, they just passed what, a $94 billion package between Ukraine and Israel? Get the fuck out of here. They don't care. Oh, we stopped the war of Vietnam. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. They found another fucking revenue stream and said, let's give it to them. There is a great piece by Jello Biafra, and it's like the American, it's a parody, of course, but it's like the Secretary of State of America calling England about, oh, we need to start another war, like profits are a little down. We need to start a war. And the guy's up there doing, he's like, oh, and don't worry about those protesters. Just pump up your drug supply, right? We fucking, had like really good organizers in the 60s, fucking kept the war running just fine, right? Until it became to be not profitable anymore. They don't care. Until you elect people before profit. I'm going to beat that dead Klansman until he looks like a smoothie. Until you fucking elect people before profit candidates, and that's just a label we use at Oakland Greens, know what we're talking about. Until you elect those people, it's not going to change. And every time you're out there being an activist on the street, your goal should be, and I don't even know if I guess call it an opinion just for positivity's sake, should be, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm famous for joking too. It's like, I personally too would rather be sitting at home smoking pot, playing video games. Absolutely. Summertime, going to the beach with my dog and not worrying about any of this shit. But I just can't in good conscience, right? That's the only reason I was always out there and all that. It's like, I just can't do it in good conscience. I can't walk by tent city after tent city, and all this shit. I can't do it. And then just sit at home and be like, oh, well, my rent's paid, my bills are paid, I got food in the house. I'm cool, right? I ain't rich, I ain't wealthy, I'm good though. Can't do it. Can't. And our goal should be, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather be out in nature, enjoying our public park. I don't know why I get some of the biggest kicks when I go by public spaces and just see people using it with their families and everything. I'm like, this is life, right? This is life. Not that other shit, not going to work for somebody else's profits. That's not life. That's the fucking shit you do that you can hopefully have a life. Anyway, I'm getting hot and ranty. But all of this too, I think would tie in if housing was a right. Maybe that, well, I have been said too that like if Ireland can redo their constitution after so long, I think we could do too. Why are we still basing our system of government on something that's over 200 years old? Right. I mean, I get it that all of our candidates are that old and all of our elected officials seem to be that old, but I don't think that's where we should be. But we should it needs a revamp. When South Africa came out of apartheid, right? They had to they had to rewrite the Constitution. When other countries gained their independence, as England lost all of its colonies, they had to write a constitution of their own. They never had one, right? They were fucking colonized. I think we need to do the same thing here. I remember once I thought that would get me on to politically incorrect with Bill Maher. It didn't, but then I was like, yeah, of course not, because it's too radical. It makes too much sense. Even then they're not going to put that on TV, on ABC. Yeah. No. So I think, again, I agree with housing being a human right. I don't agree with debt and don't do credit either. And we again, shout out for our hybrids and virtual discussion groups. We do another one on education and we'll be talking about the same shit again because it all ties up again. So I'm actually don't have anything else. Again, oh, Greg, yes, please.
Yeah, just one little quick thing about debt. I mean, money, the way that money is created and used in this country is a tool of the government and the ruling class to maintain their wealth. Because look what happened in the 2008 financial crisis. All these banks and AGI and all these places were going under, and they pumped trillions. That's trillions of dollars to prop up that system. And even during COVID, they pumped in another trillion or $2 trillion just to maintain the economy. And so, if you wanted to make housing a human right, let alone also healthcare and education and all the other things that people need, there is plenty of money because they can just create the money to make it happen. But of course, that would disrupt their control of their capitalist system and their privileges. So that's the other thing about debt. Don't think that there's not the money there. The money is there. It's just being controlled in a way that doesn't get used for people. It gets used for the wealth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we wrote that on the back of that dead Klansman robe that I keep beating. So it's exactly true. And the thing that stuck out most is control. All of this is about control. It's actually not even classist, but it's classist in the sense of Taylor Swift, Oprah money, right? Bezos, Musk money, and everybody else. Everybody, they don't even, oh, fucking, oh my God, it's Chris Rock joke, right? If Oprah woke up one morning with only Bill Gates money, she'd throw herself out the window. Like it's like that type of guy, like, what? I've only got $3 billion. Why? You fucking kill yourself and shit like that. Motherfucker, wake up that it doesn't. Well, what's really gonna fuck them, because, and the only reason I was saying that at the end is because I know I just ran, right? I get into it and I just start flowing and then it just doesn't stop. And I don't want to, I know that as far as step up, step back, I'm always should take a step back. Everyone know that that's like within Robert's rules and shit of meetings and stuff. Step up. So if you're normally a person who talks a lot, that you have to be mindful to every once in a while pause. I've gotten really good at not ums and ahs, like and just stopping, but to pause and go, does anyone else have anything to say? Because I'm just, especially once I get going, once it starts coming, it just starts coming. Like everything that's up here just starts coming out. And I always have to be mindful to go, pause. Does anyone have anything else? Like I don't want to overstay, because then even if it's no matter how long, and we've had discussions and events that have actually used up the whole 3 hours and all that, but usually there's like 9, 10 people and more people talking. But I know like it gets ad nauseum if I'm just going at it. Anyway, that's why. So we can keep going as much as possible. But what's really going to fuck them, or unfuck them, as I like to change to, is money doesn't exist. It's all information. There isn't $1 billion in print. I'm not even sure if there's $1 million in print. But it's all just information. So if everything gets erased on the internet, which is possible, you can do it. And I bet Mother Nature could do it, right? If all the backups to the backups and the backups all get flooded, all that information's gone. I know in the earthquake, San Francisco, they lost a lot of health records and stuff that they could never get back, right? Because it wasn't digitized at all anyway. And it just got flooded and all this shit, and it's just gone. Same thing with money. You wipe it out, an EMP, poof, gone. You ain't got shit, right? There's no more or even again, a natural disaster just in like in neighborhoods and things, when all of the ATMs or any electricity gets shut down. Can't use your card anymore. Can't use Apple Pay. Right? How you buying your food? Right? They're not just going to give it to you. Right? You're going to have to hope that you're Euro-American, and then they'll advertise it as you're getting supplies. But for the rest of us, we're going to be looters when we're getting the baby formula and the potatoes and shit like that, right? Again, going back to like my favorite movie cliches in Game of Thrones, when they're about to have the siege of King Landing, and Bronn says too, is like, have you ever been in the siege? Because the first thing to go is all the food. The thieves steal all the food. And then after the siege's going on, people start like, oh yeah, I'll sell you a potato for, a diamond, or your virtue, things like that. There's pearls of wisdom inside of writing that if you really start looking, like, man, this really could be used now. And how horrible is that we haven't changed that much, really. So I think it is important to realize that in essence too, it's all an illusion, right? It's not real, and can be shut down and taken away like that. And the way that these new superstorms are coming, right? And we're too reactionary. We don't prepare, right, for things. So all this is going to happen, and then what are you going to do? Like, there's nothing, like I said this in the past too. Oakland has the most urban farms per capita of any city, right? And probably because we have like some of the most temperate climate. Tomatoes tend to grow well here, right? if you know how to grow your own, the people that know how to grow their own food, I can make fire. Like those are the people that are going to survive. But people that are so reliable on nothing but gadgets and have no skills, you're the Mad Max. You're the ones that will be in the post-apocalyptic, everybody else living great. Well, I keep water. I keep water and animal food and canned goods and things like that too, just in case. Because our earthquake's coming too, right? Our big earthquake is overdue again, right? We're way past 30 years. So what are you going to do? Like those people will be the ones that survive, and everybody else, what is the mind saying too, where it wasn't that the world would end, but that the river's going to change, and those who know how to navigate the river will survive, and those who try to fight the river will perish, right? The river knows where it's going, and all you can do is follow it. You can dam it, you can put dams up, you can try and manipulate where it's going, erosion and things like that. But the river's going to go where the river's going to fucking go. So, well, again, I think that's a good, unless anyone has anything else, other comments, questions. Seeing none, I think we have another successful event. I'm glad everyone for showing up. And then for everyone else, this is Vicente Cruz, Oakland Greens event and fundraising coordinator. And remember, we will be back in person for sure on movie night, last Sunday of each month, January through October. And for February, it's Sausage Party. So this is an adult film. Probably, I say it too, it is, I don't know how they made it. I do not know how they made it in past with all the so-called wokeness and people that are all triggered and all that, because it is one of the most offensive, like every stereo. Oh my gosh. If you've never seen it, it's funny, it's good, but like, well, I say too, it's definitely an adult film. Have to have adult supervision, but if you do bring your kids, whether they're middle school I would not bring in my elementary school kid. But you bring them, you can do it because they're your kids, but it's going to be a huge discussion on the way home. Like you're going to be up all night with that talk, especially if you've sheltered your child. So I don't recommend it. The Oakland Greens do not recommend you bringing kids, but we do recommend you coming to it. Please go to our pages and also and donate. The money doesn't go to individuals, but it pays for the literature when we get out and about for outreach. Of course, we do other fundraising events like our fancy True Sound of Liberty Oakland Greens shirts. We have other designs we'd like to do. Also, again, it's just a perpetuate. How do we navigate a corrupt capitalist system and get the message out to people? Please participate, become involved in the community. We understand, I understand how much of a struggle it is, but we've been hitting snooze way too long. And, oh, you know what? I'll do a shout out too. May 1st, right? There seems to be movement for a general strike this year and next year on May 1st. Don't go to work on May 1st. Don't try not to spend money. Make it a buy nothing day too. Or at the very least, don't buy any national chain goods, right? Buy local things, Anyway, that's all I can say for this anyway. This has been our virtual assignment on housing, and again, another digressions, and we thank you very much for your time, and peace out, everyone. See you later. See you at the movie night. Bye.